you to today's webinar, Breaking Down Silos, Lifetime Engagement. So we're going to do a quick audio check before we go any further, just to make sure you can hear me. So tweet me or raise your hand in the GoToWebinar dashboard. Perfect, Caroline. Thank you so much, and Nancy and Eric and everybody who's raising their hand right now. Really appreciate it. Wonderful. Well, let's get started. So today, some of you folks who join us on webinars frequently know that we're usually at 2 p.m. Eastern. Today, we are doing a lunch and learn at noon Eastern. So hopefully, folks joining us on the East Coast are enjoying a nice lunch right now and going to learn some really awesome stuff. If you're all the way out there on the West Coast, good morning and thanks for joining us today. So during today's webinar, you can use the chat feature to ask questions. We will save about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A, and if for some reason we don't get to your question, we'll follow up with an answer on the mStoner blog a little bit later this week or early next week. You can also tweet questions to the hashtag for today, which is mStoner, L-E-M, and that's L-E-M, of course, for Lifetime Engagement Management. So I'll be hanging out in the back channel and we'll be interacting with you folks back there while Fran is presenting. And speaking of Fran, I am thrilled to introduce today's presenter, Fran Zablocki. As a strategist at mStoner, Fran helps institutions create websites, print, social media, and mobile projects. Fran brings 9 years of experience in higher education, web communication, strategy, and project management to mStoner. And he's presented at a number of conferences, including the National Higher Ed Web Conference, as well as regional events, E.edu Summit, and SUNY's Blog. He's also been a guest host and producer on higheredlive.com. During today's session, you can tweet Fran. His Twitter handle is @Zablocki. And don't forget to use that hashtag mStonerLEM. Fran, without further ado, let's get this session started.
All right. Thank you very much, Mallory. Excellent introduction. Thanks, everybody, for joining me on your lunch hour or earlier in the day. I'm really excited to be presenting today on a topic that I'm sure is very close to all of your hearts, and that is silos and the breaking down of the silos with lifetime engagement. So let me get started by introducing myself again, which is not really redundant. I have an intention here with this slide. I want to go back in time a little bit and give you an idea for how I came about talking and thinking and writing about this particular topic. So I am now a strategist at mStoner. Before that, I was a project manager. Before that, I worked in the Alumni Relations office at SUNY Geneseo as the online community manager. Prior to that, I was in the marketing communications office at Nazareth College for a number of years. Prior to that, when I was getting my master's degree, I worked in the undergraduate admissions data office at the University of Buffalo. And prior to that, when I was a student, I worked in pretty much every single office on campus, but I was primarily in residential life and athletics. So the purpose of me illustrating all this backstory is to give you an idea that I worked in most, not all, but most areas on campus at some point in my life. And as I've worked in all these different areas, I've kind of come up with this kind of collective view on how everything could be interrelated and some of the gaps that we have typically on campus where things aren't as related as they should be. So that's the kind of the impetus for this entire conversation, which is lifetime engagement management. And lifetime engagement management is essentially something that I coined. I kind of borrowed from a couple of different terms. Really, it is similar to, you can essentially substitute the name lifetime or lifelong or life cycle, relationship or engagement can be used. So really, the terminology may be different depending on where you're coming from, but that's what we're talking about, life cycle and relationship management. And I'm going to break this talk out into the various components of the title itself. So first I'm going to talk to you about what I mean by lifetime. Then I'm going to go into what I mean by lifetime engagement, and then finally we'll talk about how to manage lifetime engagement on your campus. So let's start with lifetime. What do I mean by that? Well, it's really all about the relationships that we have, and these are lifelong relationships that we have. So the second that we send a prospect a message, or they get on an email list, or they take a look at a view book, they're essentially engaged in a relationship with us. And their attitude towards us and their affinity towards us changes over time. So when they're a prospect, they are just trying to figure out who we are. If they actually take a look at a piece of mail or email, that we've essentially gotten their attention. If they reach back out to us and inquire about something, then they want to know more, and we label them an inquiry. This is all part of the enrollment management phase, of course. They may take the further step of wanting to come and visit us on campus, and then they are a visitor. They will then further, hopefully, apply to our campus, and at that point, we'd like to think that they are actually only going to be seeing us, but anyone who works in enrollment management knows that they're probably telling that to a good half dozen, if not more, institutions. So we really don't know if they're truly ours until they have enrolled and even shown up the first day on campus. And this relationship continues and becomes more and more emotionally charged over time. So now they're at our campus. They can't imagine not being at our campus. They love us, and we call them a matriculant. They graduate. It's a great moment in their life. They really feel transformed, and we call them a graduate. They are just out of school, getting hit with the realities of being a young alum in a tough environment, and they're reaching back to us for some help, some career guidance. And then maybe later on, after they've succeeded and have started a career, they would might fall away from us a little bit as they get busier and busier and start to raise a family, perhaps. And so those are our alumni, rather. And then later on, we hope that they will eventually feel strongly enough about this relationship that they built with us that they want to give back and return the favor for all the good things that they've gotten from us. And ultimately, even at the end of this lifetime, some people have had such a strong positive relationship with us that they want others to have the same kind of relationship, and they may even be someone who gives a bequest near to the end of their life. So lifelong emotional relationships that we have with individuals. And notice that I've used a lot of different terminology of how we describe the folks at different stages of this relationship. But the labels are really the wrong way of looking at it. They're people, and they're the same people over time. They're not really the labels that we use. And really, we're not seeing eye to eye with the folks, with our constituents and our audiences. We actually have different perspectives on what they are and what we are. And so their perspectives on themselves differ greatly from ours. Our perspective on them is that they're a prospect or an open or an inquiry or a visitor or an applicant or an enrollee, because we work in these individual offices and we have different ways of describing them. Their perspective from the outside is that it's just them. And if you think about it, it's easy enough to put yourself in their shoes, because really we are all in their shoes. Any of us who have been to any kind of school and have spent any kind of time there have at one point or another been any of those items on the right, but really, from our perspective, it's always just been me, just at different points in my life. So the same thing essentially continues on all the way through that cycle, and is also, on the reverse side, thought of differently. So you have all of our internal divisions of departments and our internal bureaucracy and staffing and the labels we use to describe ourselves, and then from their perspective, it's still just one thing. It's just my university. So they're not actually, they may be aware that they're getting something from the admissions office, but over the course of their lifetime, they're not thinking of it like, oh, I just got this great thing from my university's admissions office or alumni office, or I got this newsletter from so-and-so. They're just thinking of it as their university. So really, ultimately what this is a relationship between me in my university. It's a one-to-one relationship. It's a one-to-one lifelong relationship, and really, it's a one-to-one lifelong reputation that we develop over a long period of time. And the cycle essentially repeats. I call it lifetime engagement, but really, it is influenced by more than one lifetime. A student graduates and becomes a parent, who then has children of their own, who may or may not become students at the same institution. The student whose parent has already gone, the legacy essentially, is going to be influenced by the relationship their parents have had with the institution, either positively or negatively. So this really continues on through many lifetimes and generation to generation. And as I mentioned, it forms a legacy. And you want that legacy, obviously, to be a good one. You want them to inherit relationships that are positive. So that's what I mean by lifetime engagement. Or sorry, lifetime rather. And so let's talk a little bit about lifetime engagement, which is essentially all the different communication points that we have with people over the various phases. So what does this entail? Well, really, there's so many different ways. If you think about collectively, how many emails do you send out just from your department to individual people a year? Well, take that, multiply that by the number of different departments that are sending somebody messages just this year, and then take that and multiply that by the number of years you've been sending these people messages since you first started contacting them when they were enrollees, and the amount of communications and sheer number of communications and types of communications is just enormous. And it can take the form of, anything really, phone conversation, a view book. They could show up to a planned event, it might be mail or email. They take a look at a printed brochure. They come on campus and tour your campus. They're going to look at your website, obviously. And then that last one's really important, because really this is the one that we don't have any control over, and that is word of mouth. They're going to hear from their friends. They're going to hear from their neighbors. They're going to meet somebody at the grocery store who's a professor and ask them what they think of working there. There's all kinds of different places where this impact is going to be felt. And conversely, you've got the different people behind all of these communications. So really, they're being communicated to from people in admissions. They might have something from the president, the secretary, an area director while they're on campus, might be sending something out to their residence hall. Later on in life, they might be getting, having lunch with a major gifts officer, a tour guide, the web content manager. But basically, the idea here is that pretty much anybody is going to end up being an influencer of the reputation that you have on campus. So what does this mean for those of us who work in various departments on campus? And I took a look at the list of folks who are on this webinar, and we have a good representation. We have some people from the enrollment management area. We have some people from student affairs. We have some people from alumni and advancement. And we all know, no matter which part of the campus we work in, where the weakest link is, right? We all can basically think of the area of campus that whenever they send out a newsletter to anyone, we all kind of do a collective head desk and wince a little bit because the quality just isn't there. So it's very easy to fall into the trap of saying, oh, if it wasn't for so-and-so, all of our publications would be just great. And it's really just easy to and cathartic to kind of just complain about it and say, well, they're not doing a good job, but that's okay. We're doing a good job and we don't have any control over it. But going back to this whole idea of a lifetime reputation, that's not really the right way to think about it, because really the audience, your constituents, don't really know who made it, and they don't really care who made it. And if it has anything official to do with the institution, they're going to think of it in the same light as they would if it was sent from your office. So you have a shared reputation with all these different departments, and because of that, you need to make sure that you're helping out the people who need it most. So if you're the expert on campus, if you're the one who does get CASE awards year after year because you just do awesome work, and you have people who are sending out really, really poorly done newsletters and things like that, don't just chide them for not doing it right and then leave it at that. Go out and reach out and say, look, we want to help you. We want to help to raise the profile of the entire institution. We have people, we have resources that can help. Basically, be the rising tide that lifts all ships. So this is tough, right? Because this isn't necessarily part of your job description. reputation management, especially across an entire life cycle, definitely not anyone's specific job, at least not yet. But it really is everybody's job and nobody's job. So make it your job, because that'll help everyone across the board. If everyone's thinking about how these types of relationships are formed across the lifetimes, you're all going to be more aware of what you're putting out. You're all going to be more aware of what each other's putting out. And ultimately, it's going to raise the quality and the profile of everything, all the communications that are going out from your institution, and raise the quality and positive affinity of the people you're trying to reach out to. So we need to change the mindset here. We need to stop having it be a competition. It can't be us versus them, and us being our department, them being those other guys in the other department. Never assume that something isn't your job. It's always your job. You're part of Team University, and you represent the entire university to everybody at all times. That's just the truth. It's a reality. People outside the university do not know, and nor do they care, nor should they, where information and where communications are coming from. They just know that it represents the university. So what are our goals to accomplishing this type of positive affinity? Well, you want to ultimately have consistency. You want to have consistency of quality. So you want to stop, you want to try to get in the way as much as you can of those newsletters being sent out using front page and Comic Sans through email. You want to make sure that you have consistency of message. You want to make sure that you're not telling somebody that the tuition is X, well, somewhere on a website or through a newsletter, someone else is telling them that the tuition is Y. And, this is a common issue, and especially with something as sensitive as financials, can really turn into a huge problem and a PR problem. So consistency of message is absolutely paramount. In order to have consistency of message, you also have to have consistency of data. How many different databases are there on campus? How many different individuals have 15 different profiles through different databases? How many different addresses are different, even for the same people? So I know that when I was working at SUNY Geneseo, this was a huge, huge challenge. We even got so granular into, I think salutations for being such a small thing is such an enormously time-consuming and challenging thing. Does one system truncate a particular salutation differently than another? Does this matter? Yes, it does, because ultimately, if you call somebody, honorable instead of reverend, you may end up offending them. So consistency of data is really, really important, and that requires a lot of collaboration between all of our different departments. And our ultimate goal here is consistency of affinity. All these things kind of percolate up to the top and offer us consistency of affinity. And we want that affinity to, essentially, if you were looking at this on a bar graph, you would want it to continue to trend upward the entire time. You would never want it to dip. It's not like the stock market, which goes up and down. You want it to just continually build upon itself and get better and better over time. So you want it to be positive. You also want it to be specific, and that's where the data comes in. You want to have really good granular information about what it is that people love about your campus. You want to be able to tell if they were part of a certain club or activity. You want to know who their favorite professor was. You want to know what residence hall they lived in, because all those things are going to help you to communicate in a more targeted and meaningful and personal manner across all your communications. You also want things to be actionable. You want them to be able to take an action and engage with you as much as possible throughout all of this. And you want things to be measurable. You need to have measurable goals. You want to know whether you're succeeding with things or whether things that aren't working and you can change them up and try something else. So consistency of affinity across their entire lifetime is the ultimate goal of lifetime engagement. Okay, that was a lot. I'm going to take a deep breath because I'm not even close to done. So here we go. Are there technology solutions for these things, right? This is kind of one of those things where you could easily throw a technology platform to try to fix all this. But we all know that technology is not going to solve people problems. However, customer relationship management systems, CRMs for short, do exist, and there are a number of different types. And this would be typically if you were to go and say, okay, I just went to this presentation and this guy Fran told me that we need to do better lifetime engagement management, what can we use as a platform? It would be likely that a CRM or something that calls itself a CRM would be the area you would be looking at. But you would find pretty quickly that most solutions are still focusing primarily on only one stage of this life cycle. This is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. There are a number of really good examples of companies doing very, very good work in their particular area. So as an example, Integral does a great job with enrollment management and retention through their Facebook Schools app. EverTrue does a fantastic job with alumni as a mobile app that helps alumni connect through LinkedIn and their school's database. iModules does a really good job with alumni and advancement as well. So these are some of the better known ones, but despite working really well, they still aren't getting the entire life cycle. But do not despair, because recently in the last few years, systems focused on the entire cycle are starting to emerge, and existing systems are starting to expand. So examples here are a program called Talisma. Talisma actually has build lifetime relationships as its tagline. So that is as clear as day that they understand that they want to get all the phases of the life cycle and be able to cater to a solution that does all of those things. Varsity Outreach is a good example of a company that is moving from the admission side of things and trying to take more of a life cycle focus. LinkedIn is doing tons of stuff in the education space and is starting to really look, even though a lot of it has so far been behind the scenes, look at how they can become more integrated with every stage of life cycle career services. So it's not just for alumni who are looking to move from one job to another. It goes all the way back to freshmen and sophomores who are going to be looking for mentors, and they're going to be looking for alumni that they can use as models for what they want to do when they get older, and they'll be able to get into LinkedIn and really start to leverage its an incredibly large amount of information right out of the gates. So they're doing a really good job. And iModules has also started to expand, and they have an enterprise edition that essentially allows multiple offices across different phases to collaborate on the same platform. So things are moving, but they're still somewhat emergent in the technology space. And so it's important to think about the technology, but it's also really important to understand that technology is not going to solve the problem here. The biggest problem that we have is people and the culture that surrounds our institution. Once we fix that, then we can find a really good technology platform that's going to work for us. So what do I mean by people tools? Well, really, open communication and collaboration is the most important thing. Just talking to people is the most important thing. Having official brand and style guidelines for consistency of messaging is really, really important. Having a good content strategy for what's going to be going out via all your communications channels can really help with this. And of course, training people on how to use all these tools and training people about all the above items also is really important. And that's really the piece that I think we can all start on today, is the open communication and collaboration piece, the people tools. So that's where we get into lifetime engagement management. How do we manage this? What does this look like every day? So we have disconnects at various transition points that we can really focus our efforts on. We have admissions, which leads to student affairs, which leads to alumni and development, and then notice that arrow in the upper right that goes back to admissions. So this is also a cycle. It's not just a linear path. The admissions office has a lot of information that they take in as people are applying. They might join a Facebook group. They may say on the Facebook group, hey, I like X, Y, and Z. These are affinities. These are things that they are interested in. Then they might go to the club fair once they're actually on campus and sign up to be club officer for some of that stuff. All that information is being gathered by student affairs during club fair and continues to be gathered year upon year by student affairs as you have different rosters and lists of people. I mean, we have athletics and things like that, which tend to already be pretty well managed, but there's a lot of information being gathered during that piece as well. And then people graduate, and a lot of times we just kind of cut them off at this point. So that arrow between student affairs and alumni and development is really the one that I think is the biggest pain point. You have people who are really closely tied to the institution all the way up until that point, but then they graduate and they lose their email address because we're not maintaining alumni email. And then we lose their contact information, so we're not able to get a hold of them. Or if we are able to get a hold of them, It's it's not a targeted message. It's something that's more generic. And so coming from the alumni side, I can tell you that there is no data collected at any point during the stream that isn't valuable to an alumni or development person. All of it is valuable. It is a long tail, so it takes a number of years for it to really become important to that last phase, but it's really, really important that data be collected when it should be collected, and that data be shared with the people who are going to need it at every stage of the game. And then, just so you don't think alumni and development are getting all the benefit, they should be giving back to enrollment. All the information they have on alumni who are successful, all the information they have on alumni who could potentially be mentors, should be shared back with admissions, because nothing sells the campus better than living, breathing examples of what your degree can help someone do with their lives. So there's a virtuous cycle here, and really everybody plays a part, and the more people share, the better it's going to be for all. So we have some problems here. We have silos of awareness, because we just don't know what each other does, right? Or even where we work. I mean, if you think about it, how many people could name all the people who work in all these different departments, or even where they are, perhaps. And we have problems. The other big problem is that we have silos of data. We have data that is located around campus in various different areas, or not at all. It's just not being collected because it's not seen as something that's important. And the solution is that we need to start to change the way we're doing things. Well, there's two different types of change to try to solve these problems. One way is change from the top down. And as an example of this, I have a couple of examples of this actually. The first is Rob Zinkin. He's the Vice Chancellor of Indiana University East, and he has been hired and tasked as the head of external affairs at Indiana University East, and basically is in charge of the Office of Communications and Marketing, where they're dealing mainly with prospective students, the Office of Campus Life, where they're dealing with current students, alumni, Office of Alumni Relations, and donors, Office of Gift Development. He's in charge of all of them, and he has people who work for him that are making sure that everybody's working together. So this isn't just a theoretical idea. There are areas around the US and around the world that are institutions around the world that are starting to adopt these practices and put them into place. Another example of change from the top down is the cabinet level champion. Somebody who's sitting with the president day to day, who's able to basically take this idea and champion it out to everybody. As an example of that is a chief digital officer. Sri Srinivasan from Columbia University, actually is no longer at Columbia. He's going to be working, I think, for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But he was hired as the first chief digital officer of Columbia. And though it may not be a perfect fit for lifetime engagement, he's the type of person and has the type of philosophy that really helps to push this type of change on campus. So that stuff, that's change from the top down. And change from the top down is all good and well, and I'm sure you're sitting there saying, great, there's really no control. I don't have no control over who is going to be in the vice chancellor or the chief digital officer position. I am not the president of my university, or maybe you are the president of the university, and if you are, welcome. I hope that you try to put something in place that uses some of these ideas. But we're likely the people who are listening right now are not in a position where they can make those types of changes. And so it's, we can't just leave it to fate, though. We need to essentially start changing the way we do things from the bottom up, starting with each of us individually. We need to tackle each of these problems individually and then with the groups of folks that we work with. So starting with the problem of silos of awareness. How do we each individually solve this problem? Well, let's just not bite off more than we can chew here. Let's start small. Have coffee with somebody. It's simple, but it works. Every week, pick somebody that you never had coffee with, or maybe you don't know what they do for their job. Just say, hey, let's go grab a cup of coffee. Tell me what you do. Tell them what you do. You'll be amazed at how simply doing that can lead to all kinds of opportunities for collaboration. Once you started to do that and become more comfortable with it, start to think a little bit bigger. Think about internal outreach and knowledge sharing. You have a lot of things that you're proud of on campus in your particular group. Make sure that other people know about it. And the example I'll use is something that Rob Zinkin talked to me about, and that is what they do at Indiana University East. And that is the TED Talk format. So if any of you are familiar with how TED Talks work, they're really quick 10-minute talks that allow somebody to convey a really good idea briefly and succinctly, but powerfully. And so what they do, what Rob does, is he has one area. They rotate basically. Every month they have a lunch and learn type of presentation, almost similar to what we have going on right now. And they will present something that they're proud of, something cool that they've been doing. One of his areas will present to all the rest of them so that they're aware of what's going on and they're able to next take shared ownership in those things. And most importantly, shared success. So one of the really big challenges to this idea of collaboration is the idea that you're going to be giving something away for free. That you're going to be doing all the work and have these great ideas, and then somebody else is essentially going to just take those and take credit for them. And we want to avoid that. And that type of thinking is certainly a valid concern, but it leads us down the wrong path towards divisiveness instead of collaboration. So the important thing is to have shared successes. So let's acknowledge everyone who had a part in a project that was cross-departmental, which of course requires there to be a cross-departmental project to begin with. But this is, another way that we can start to think big about this. And I'll give you one example from my time at Geneseo. I was in the alumni office, and we were trying to figure out a way to get new graduates, actually seniors who hadn't even graduated yet, to use our new alumni system. And we knew the day they walked across the stage was going to be our last opportunity to get them, and then they were going to go, hopefully, all over the world and do amazing things and start, working for companies and getting graduate degrees and just doing incredible stuff. But we're going to lose our best last chance of getting them interested and signed up for this particular community. So we developed. So I went to the folks who I went and had coffee with the folks who do the senior week events, and I said, hey, is there any way that we can collaborate on this and get this get this moving? And they were like, you know what? Good thing you asked, because we're just starting this year a program where we have all of our pre-graduation events in one single place. And we can put you at a table in the middle of the student union next to the folks who are going to be signing people up for the caps and gowns and making sure they get their senior class gifts and things like that. And they're going to be a captive audience because they're going to be waiting in line and they're going to need to do all this stuff anyways. And we'll just make this one more big checkbox of what they need to do. And so what we did was we got a whole bunch of people from the Alumni and Advancement Office and the Marketing Communications Office and the people who were part of Student Affairs who were doing this event together, trained them on how to help people sign up, grabbed a whole bunch of netbooks from the library, who was nice enough to loan those to us, and basically had a whole bunch of kiosks that we set up in the middle of the student union and had like 75% of the senior class sign up in that first year. And of course, that was a huge success. We were really excited that we were able to do that. But the important thing was to follow up afterward and make sure that everybody who had a part in it was thanked and had a part of that shared success so that we could continue to collaborate and people felt like the work that they had done was being valued. So can't emphasize enough, this is a really great way of approaching this. Okay, another way to think big is to attend another department's meetings, whether or not you've asked in advance. I know this is might get you in a little bit of trouble, but I doubt it. If you just show up to another department's meetings and they are willing to let you sit there and listen in, you probably will be able to get at least 2 or 3 things you didn't know about back to your department and share. If they want to know why in the world anyone would want to attend a meeting that they're not already invited to, you can just say, hey, I just want to know more about what you guys are up to. I would imagine few people are going to argue if you take initiative and show interest in what they're doing. And the hope is that eventually they will return the favor and you can start something really good where you cross-pollinate in your meetings and start to really think collaboratively. Okay, so that's thinking big. Let's start to think really big. What about hybrid employees? What about eventually having people who work 20 hours a week in the advancement office and 20 hours a week in the alumni, or sorry, in the enrollment and admissions office. And that is actually their job description. And they have two bosses, but they're able to collaborate and be a point of connection between the two. And this type of thing is actually starting. And I had someone approach me the last time I did this talk afterward and said, I was just hired at such and such university to do exactly that thing. And I work 20 hours a week in one and 20 hours a week in another. So I think this is a really, this is something that's not necessarily easy for us to control unless someone here is in human resources. But I think it's a really interesting idea and kind of a permanent, more permanent way of bridging the gap between departments. Another way to think really big about this is holistic management training. And I take this idea from some of the stuff I learned when I was getting a graduate degree in business, and where a lot of corporations will take a manager and put them through a training program where they essentially are embedded within a particular division or department for a certain number, a period of time, a couple of weeks or maybe a month, to get a feel for what that area does. Then they're moved to the next one. Then they're moved to the next one. And they work in every single area of the business, in this case, in every single area of the institution for a little while. And then they get their permanent appointment. But that type of hiring or training of people who are already there, who are managers, could really help to build awareness of what everyone else is doing and to help collaboration. And that also extends to collaborative professional development, having professional development that is cross-departmental. Instead of just having training and professional development opportunities be the people who you already work with, have it be people who work in other areas. Okay, so that's all different ideas and ways to start thinking about solving the problem of silos of awareness. Well, how about silos of data? How are we going to start solving that? Well, let's start small once again. Really, just make a list. Make a list of all the types of information that could help you. Not a list of all the types of information the university has that could help you. Everything, no matter how outlandish or how obscure or how difficult you think it'll be to find, just make a list. Then make a list of all the things that you have in-house that you can share with other people. And think about who might be able to benefit from that information. And the flip side. So basically, what you're trying to do is think up a data definition list for your area. And then as you're collaborating with everybody through the previous section, where you're going to different meetings and things like that, start offering up the data to them. Say, you know what, I've got all this information in my area, and I'd really like, I think it could be of value to you. I mean, I think, I work in alumni, maybe you'd like a list of folks who could potentially be alumni ambassadors or mentors, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So take initiative and be the change. Offer something freely first, and you'll will get so much back in return, instead of going to somebody and first starting out the conversation with, you have all this stuff that we need, can we please have it? Just flip it around and say, hey, I have all this stuff that you need. Here you go. Do you happen to have anything that I need? You can really just change the tone of the entire thing right from the beginning. So that's some smaller things you can do, right? But let's start to think a little bit bigger on this with institution-wide data definitions. And this gets back to my point about salutations. The more different instances of the same data field you have on campus, the harder it is going to be to be consistent with your communications. So we're ultimately always working toward getting a single point of data on campus. It may be a pipe dream, but we should still strive to achieve that ultimate goal. And that will lead to a single lifetime system identity. If we can get all of our data tidied up on the back end and only have a single entry point for it, all of our users will only have to have one account and won't have to lose passwords and lose emails and re-authenticate and do a million different things over the course of their lifetime, which will help affinity be more positive as well. All right, so let's start to think really big with data. What can we start to do with data in the future? Well, one thing that I've been really looking at closely lately is big data. Big data is essentially the fact that we've had a convergence of cheap storage on computers and the internet providing a way to move enormous amounts of data all over the world very, very quickly and it's really starting to, and cheaper and more powerful processing power for computers. So all these things have kind of converged to allow us to have this enormous fire hose of information if we want it. But the trouble is, what do we actually do with all this stuff? And I'm actually really excited. I have a special guest star for this webinar, Derek Duncan from the University of Denver is going to give us an example of what one type of big data practice called predictive modeling that he's actually working on and that you might be able to do as well. So Derek, thanks for joining me, and short notice no less, and take it away.
Great, thanks Fran, and good morning everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining from. Thrilled to have the opportunity to be here today because all of this lifetime engagement stuff is a topic that I too am really passionate about, and so happy to have the opportunity to share with you all what we've been working on here at the University of Denver. So like Fran mentioned, introducing this idea of predictive modeling has been a really cool and really big step forward for us. Where we've started here in our advancement group is a place that will be very familiar to most of you, which is kind of what I would call intuition-based targeting. And that is, we go into our campaigns and we have, from our own experience, from some past results, a general idea of what data points are going to be important for targeting our constituents. We want to go after folks that are past donors or folks that are graduates of a particular program or got a particular degree. And we have a good idea and we trust our gut and use that to target our campaigns. But by inserting this middle bubble here, by inserting some predictive modeling tools, it allows us to be agnostic about what data points are going to be predictive about who might respond to our campaign. And where we've plugged that in now has been on some solicitation campaigns, some alumni engagement campaigns, but the concept really applies regardless of where in the life cycle you're dealing with folks. So that could be predictive modeling on the admissions end to identify students that are most likely to enroll. It could be predictive modeling in the current student cycle to identify students that are most likely to continue their engagement. Really, that tool is very flexible and very powerful in helping us to identify and focus our efforts on the most effective people that we're going to be able to talk with. As everyone in higher ed knows, there just aren't enough hours in the day and there aren't enough dollars in the budget to do everything that we would want to do. So predictive modeling has really given us a tool to focus that. In addition to predictive modeling, I mentioned there's all of that really easily accessible advancement data up there in that top box. So we know who has given before, we know their academic profile in terms of where they graduated from, but that only gives us a piece of the picture. And so some of the silos that we've been able to chip away at, the first one is actually just a technology silo. So still looking at our advancement data, something like email open rates. We found that looking at an individual person's open rate on our series of emails is obviously a really big predictor of how likely they're going to be to engage with us. That's intuitive. We know that that would make sense, but being able to tie that data in and let it play out in real numbers is really powerful. Things like event attendance, making sure our event management systems feed into this, and all of those technology platforms, centralizing them so we can get a better idea of how an alumni is engaging with us, or any constituent for that matter. The other silo that we've been chipping away at are those departmental silos. Obviously, the advancement department only owns a small piece of the relationship with an alumni. There's lots of other things those folks are doing with us, from going to athletic events, performing arts, going to different departments, lectures and events, tons of stuff. And so by getting in there and starting to piece together some of that data, once again, we can add a lot of precision to that predictive modeling tool, make that algorithm a lot more precise when it's helping us identify folks that we should be talking to most. This is breaking down these silos is a long journey, and we're certainly, we still have quite a ways to go. But what we've been able to do here is we've gotten some small wins by bubblegumming some data together, by showing small examples, and that's really helping us to take the case upward in our organization and show results of what this could look like to our leadership and get them excited about it as we launch these campaigns. As we look at the next slide here, once we've used that predictive model to identify those best folks that we should be talking to, another one of the things that we know intuitively is that not all of our alumni are created equal. Not all of our constituents at any point are created equally, and some people are going to respond to different things. So with this particular campaign that we've shown, we actually divided that group up into 4 different segments, and each of them got a different appeal in their solicitation message. So for some folks, we talked about their school or program specifically that they graduated from, that they probably have a lot of affinity to. For others, we talked about innovations and new developments on campus, new buildings that are going up, lots of really exciting, fun new stuff that's happening. Some folks got a direct message from some current students saying, hey, your support really helps us out. We appreciate it. It's great being on campus, sharing their experience. And then accomplishments and prestige. Our athletes are doing great. Our students are getting awards. Tons of stuff to instill pride in the university. So we show these different messages out there in the campaign. And the idea of testing is not necessarily new. Lots of people will do a test like this, but then afterwards they'll go, okay, this one message performed best, so that's our message. And it's kind of a winner-take-all proposition. And what we've done is we've shifted that away to say, no, let's identify what the best message is for people or for segments. So the next time we'll test this again, next time we'll test it again with some new messages, and after a while we'll start to have data to point to, this segment of data, if we're at a segment level, they really respond best to the accomplishment message, and that's where we should focus. But a different one, they like school or program specific things. If we really got fancy, we could take that down to the individual level and say, John Doe really likes direct messages from students. That tends to be what resonates best with him, so we can focus on that channel when we're talking to that particular constituent. So lots of really fun stuff that we're starting to test out, starting to get our hands into, that we think is going to get us some really good results. And really, we're at this point, we're making some great incremental changes in the way we do things, but it has all started with a lot of the stuff that Fran was talking about earlier. We've had coffee with our colleagues around campus. We actually have a monthly marketing confab meeting where all of our marketing professionals from across campus, from across departments come together. It's a forum for us to share ideas, to update people on what other departments are working on, and it's really been effective. And that is really where the connection got made, so that someone like myself who works in the central marketing communications office can collaborate with my colleagues over an advancement to do really cool work like this. So we're excited. It's a long journey ahead of us, but we think we're going in the right direction. And we're really seeing some of our senior leadership on campus get excited about this now that the idea of connecting all of this and doing data integrated communications is becoming a little less conceptual, and they're starting to see some really cool results from it.
That's awesome, Derek. Thank you very much. And just to give you an idea, I asked Derek to do this yesterday. I asked him to jump into this webinar yesterday, and he was able to pull together these slides. And I think it's just great to have a strong example of where this is being successful, and some of the practical applications that come out of this type of collaboration. So thank you again, Derek, for joining us today. And later, toward the end of the talk, I'll have Derek's contact information up for a little bit in case you want to reach out to him. And I'll take this opportunity too to say that I am interested in hearing about your success stories in this arena, and I am totally willing to use my presentations as a place to trumpet where things are going right. So just like Derek did with the University of Denver, if you have something that you'd like to share with me, that you'd like to get the word out about, please do send something my way following this presentation. All right, so getting back to the presentation itself, we were thinking really big about how we were going to use data, and I was talking a little bit about big data, and Derek was talking a little bit about predictive modeling. Well, another thing we can do with big data is dynamic interactive data visualizations. One thing that I was asked to do at SUNY Geneseo that I could not do because we did not have the data we needed, but I would have loved to be able to do, was to do some kind of interactive alumni population density map. And there are now programs that can crunch a lot of this data and allow you to put put that type of information visually on a map, on a website, which can be for internal or external use, but really it's incredible what we can do now with the web and with HTML5 in particular. It allows us to do some really, really impressive real-time data visualizations, not just infographics that are static, but stuff where people can hover over stuff. So if you've followed the presidential elections on CNN or Time, you'll notice that they do this to keep track of, essentially where votes are going in real time. And there's no reason why we can't start doing this in higher ed. We just need to start collaborating and get better data. So that is one example. Another example is just leveraging some outside systems who are already in this space and doing this type of thing. And I mentioned LinkedIn earlier, and LinkedIn is an enormous database and has so much information that our graduates put in there. Typically, I mean, I found that 75% of the people who are alumni of a particular institution are on LinkedIn, but not part of the alumni group, official alumni group. So there's a really good opportunity within LinkedIn for alumni to alumni professionals to connect with that 75% that are not yet part of the group. One way of doing that, and one program that I'd like to highlight that does a really good job of this, is Evertrue. This is a company that has targeted the alumni space with a mobile app that basically combines the data that's in the LinkedIn database with the data that you have in your internal system, and allows individuals to update their information in real time and uses a social aspect where your friend can see your profile, see that you have a particular job listed, notice that it isn't correct, and can flag and ping you to update it. And they've had a lot of success here, and it's a really interesting application of LinkedIn. It's basically taking LinkedIn's big data and filtering it into a very useful set of tools for admissions and alumni. So I would encourage all of you to take a look at Evertrue at some point. So wrapping things up, what's the potential of doing all of this? And we've seen some of that from what Derek is doing and what Indiana University East is doing with Rob Zinkin. Well, in general, we want, the potential here is to better our reputation. It's to have more strategic communications. It's to have more involved alumni, more successful fundraising. On the other side, the threat is not being agile enough for the EDU apocalypse or edu-apocalypse. Now, the sky is not always falling, but there are a lot of external threats to higher education at this point. And I think the philosophy of collaboration and lifetime engagement management is a really good one to help us to be as ready as we possibly can be to all of the different changes that are coming our way day in and day out. The threat is also disconnected or lost relationships if we're not doing this correctly, upset alumni, less donors and donations, a weakened reputation. So the exact opposite, all bad. The takeaway, if you're gonna bullet point a few things for folks who weren't part of the talk, put yourself in your audience's shoes. It's not hard, we've all been there. We're all graduates of somewhere, we're all alumni of somewhere. Put yourself in your audience's shoes whenever you're doing communications. Think of it from a user perspective as opposed to the internal perspective. Audiences see the institution as a single entity, and we need to start acting like one in order for all this stuff to work. Think about it as if every single applicant is a future alum. So work with the admissions department. Every single sophomore could be your future potential board member, so work with residential life. Every junior could be your next major donor, so work with student affairs. Every senior could be your next alumni mentor, so work with career services. And work with parent relations, because every family has a legacy, reputation that they're building. All right, thank you all very much for joining me. I am a little bit over. I think I've got about 5 minutes for questions. I'm also going to put up Derek's contact information for a minute, and I've got some further resources that I'll put up in a minute or two. So, Mallory.
Yes, here I am.
Do we have any questions? Hello.
We do have some questions, and just a reminder to everybody on the webinar, if you would like to submit questions, you can tweet them or send them through the GoToWebinar control panel. Fran, let me start with one of today's questions. where are good places to start looking for useful data on campus? You know, is it the student newspaper? Is it the orientation office? You know, where can folks look for that useful data on campus?
Sure, sure. Well, so I think the answer is that think about where the affinities are being recorded. You know, where are we able to capture what people are most interested in? And I think there's a lot of different places on campus. Like I mentioned earlier, I think the orientation team and the student life team who's putting on club fair. I mean, all the people who show interest in those types of events. See if there's data that's being collected. And if there's not, see if the people who are doing that can not throw it out after they're done with it every year and share it with you. I think that the student newspaper can be a good place because you can see who are good writers, for instance. I think that the club student union and student clubs are really good places to figure out where not only people are showing interest in a particular area, but also who your potential alumni leaders are, because the folks who are leading the student groups of today are very likely to be the ones who are going to be leading the alumni groups and be involved once they've graduated. So, you know, the Advancement Services Office is a good place to go if you work in an area outside alumni or advancement and you'd like to get information on alumni, who's working in particular industries, and you know who has written on particular things. And so that could be useful to the admissions office if they're looking to recruit some alumni volunteers to be ambassadors. So I think, you know, there's all kinds of places on campus where this type of information lives, and sometimes it's just a simple process to just go and ask if you can have access.
Right on. So what if, I guess as a follow-up to that, what if the culture on your campus is very territorial and, you know, folks, you had mentioned during the webinar, you know, sit in on different departments meeting. You know, what if that's just not possible because of the culture of your campus?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a tough reality. It's not always so easy, you know. I mean, there's a lot of situations where uh, the relationship between departments has deteriorated over time to a point where, you know, there is none, or it's just it's a relationship of animosity, and so it can be really hard to figure out what to do there. And my best advice would be to try to find an individual who is of like mind and wants to collaborate, and just start a relationship one-to-one with them and see if you can do something small that's successful between the two departments, and maybe even something that no one's aware that you're doing until you're done with it. And then take that to everybody and say, look, like, we did this awesome thing. We really can work together. You know, I mean, lead by example, essentially. I've done that a couple times. I had my one person that I worked with in admissions when I was in marketing at Nazareth. I had my one person I worked with in student affairs when I was in alumni at Geneseo. And that can be tough because, you know, if that person leaves, that can kind of, you know, you lose your diplomatic lifeline. But it really just comes down to individual relationships. So instead of, if it's really a hostile environment and you know you couldn't possibly go to the director or just jump in on the meeting, see if you can reach out to, or identify and reach out to the individual who you think would be most open to some kind of smaller collaboration, and see if you can kind of start things there.
Great answer. Thanks, Fran. And thanks to our special guest star, Derek Duncan, today. It was really nice having you join us, Derek, and giving us some information in your case study. As a reminder, please don't forget to fill out the very short survey once you log out of the webinar. Your feedback is really valuable, and it helps us determine future webinar topics, and it gives the presenters a sense of how they did and whether or not the webinar met your expectations. And so we really appreciate your 2 minutes that it'll take you to fill that out, and it'll help us out tremendously. Thanks so much for attending today, Fran. Derek, thank you for leading such a wonderful webinar. And please watch the mStoner blog for our next webinar, and Fran will also be posting within the next few days his slides and a link to this webinar's archive, because we have been recording this webinar, and assuming technology works in our favor, we'll get that posted on our YouTube channel shortly. All right, thanks everyone so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.